Returning to the show after an extensive time away is our friend Chris Maidment. How is life today, Chris?
It is a beautiful, 98-degree day up here in New Hampshire for the first official day of summer. Wouldn't have it any other way, I guess. Tomorrow it's going to be 30 degrees cooler, and we're all gonna love it, right?
That's right. You gotta love New England. Yeah, we're recording on Thursday, June 20th. I'm not sure if this is going out tomorrow or early next week, but it's darn hot. My family came back from market days in Concord, melting and bright red, and tomorrow it'll be a whole different day. And Dexter Tarbox is here with us too, contributor here for the show. How's life?
Hey, great to join you. I hate the heat. I'm ready for it to be done.
All right, so I happened to see on the old X here, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that Chris here is running for Register of Probate with the most hilarious tagline I can imagine. It's important. And I would like to know what boomer told you it's important and you stole it in order to have for your poster.
Oh, I came up with it all on my own. I actually got my inspiration. Ross Berry moved from Manchester up to Ware, so he had to resign his seat in Manchester, and now he's running again. So Ross Berry will most assuredly be back in the House. And his new signs, now that he has some land in Ware and is an aspiring chicken farmer like myself, he decided to put "I'm no chicken" on his sign, or "He's no chicken." And I saw that, and I said, I got to come up with something catchy for my signs, and I slapped "It's important" on there, which is obviously tongue-in-cheek, which I'm sure we're going to get into here. But no boomers, no, just me. I guess I'm getting closer to that, closer and closer to boomer, though.
You're homesteading and running for office. You've narrowly escaped all the craziness that was this previous election season. I mean, before we dive into maybe your election, I'd love to know your takeaways, as I haven't spoken to you since the primary and all the craziness that came with that. I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about or want to talk about, but I'd love to hear what you're willing to talk about.
Well, if Stormy Daniels can break her NDA, then I'm sure I'm good too. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have one. But I think that the most interesting takeaway I have from the primary, and I've thought about this quite a bit actually, is that if Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy had not dropped out before New Hampshire, there's a very good chance that Nikki Haley would have won the primary here. Even if it was only 7% for Ramaswamy and 7% for DeSantis, wherever they were polling at the time, both of them were pulling votes from Trump, certainly not from Haley. So I think, in hindsight, if they hadn't dropped out, Nikki Haley would have won a state, which, could have changed a lot of things, but they both did. And Trump won, and he's on to take the nomination and hopefully win in November.
Yeah, Dexter, you mentioned to me you read an article in National Review recently. I'll let you bring it up here.
Well, yeah, in fact, I kind of thought of you, Chris, when I saw this headline the other day, because, yeah, it was an editorial in the National Review, of course, where they were suggesting that the best vice presidential pick that Trump could possibly make would be Nikki Haley. And it just immediately draws to mind people like yourself who gave up very good positions of prominence in the political field in protest of the idea of her nomination. And so my initial reaction was to vomit at the thought. I assume that you probably have a similar reaction. But obviously, I won't say that they didn't make any interesting points. There are a lot of sort of suburban neocons, especially here in New Hampshire in many ways, and many other states that are in play this year, who will need to be won back over, who are not necessarily never Trumpers, but fully embrace that Nikki Haley train. So again, while I assume your reaction to the idea of her vice president is similar to mine, I'd be interested to hear it though. But what do you think? What do you think actually may be true of that, if anything? Does he need to make some sort of overture to those voters?
So I certainly think that part is true. He needs to make some overtures to the Haley voters. By and large, these are, suburban women. They're suburban men too. That, like you said, they're not necessarily never Trumpers, but they're much more old school Republican. Okay, I thought I froze there for a second. My apologies. They're much more old school Republican, Bush era Republican. And I think with all the turmoil we see across the world, Ukraine, Israel, Iran, Lebanon, like all these countries tensions are rising. And so I think there's a lot of feeling out there that we need to be doing more. But I think Trump has certainly pivoted in that direction about, wanting to do more in Ukraine, wanting to do more for Israel, wanting to do more on the world stage. Whereas his first term, he was much more, I don't want to say isolationist, but he was much more provocative, right? He wasn't starting new wars. He wanted to end the Afghanistan war, bring everybody home. And I think it's a careful balancing act now, the position that he's in, given the situation in Ukraine and Israel, because a lot of Republicans want to support both of those countries, and it goes against, I think, what his instinct might be, which is to not be involved as much. And this is playing out in Republican primaries across the country. We saw on Tuesday, he endorsed John McGuire over Bob Good, who is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus in Virginia. And Bob Good was much more, let's rein in this Ukraine aid. Let's rein in the foreign aid. Let's America first, right? Which is what Donald Trump's first term was all about. And now folks in the Republican Party that have that ideology are seeing primaries that are getting the backing of Trump. There's a lot of folks I've seen on X and Twitter or Facebook saying, oh, it's because he endorsed DeSantis. It's not that, because Trump has endorsed a number of candidates that back DeSantis. I think it's much more about their stance, their policy stances generally, and Ukraine and Israel aid is a big part of that, in my opinion.
It's really fascinating to me, and it really probably goes to show the age problem we currently have in D.C. with the people in power, where we have 3 boomers running for president that are the main players, and each one of them is...
AJ, I think they're older than boomers. I don't know what the generation before that was.
Probably silent generation, especially Biden, where it's like all 3 of them have the same exact foreign policy stance for the most part. I think Trump is definitely be more of a wild card. I think he's playing a little bit to the base right now personally, and it's not necessarily... I think he's one to, we're going to rip the Band-Aid off, we're going to go all in like Obama promised he would originally do when we were talking in the Middle East. That's more likely than anything else with him, but it's really shocking and disappointing as an isolationist Granite Stater to see the stances from all 3 of these guys.
Well, that's why I wonder, again, it's sort of an outrageous suggestion, Nikki, for vice president, but are we going to see someone of that type, someone with more of an interventionist, ideology, who, again, coming back to New Hampshire, we thought during the primary, the New Hampshire voters would be the saving grace for that ideology, that Nikki would be lifted up here. And again, I think for the reasons, Chris, that you mentioned, but others as well, that didn't happen. Is he going to need to attach someone like that to his campaign to win those people over? Because we know that they're holding out in all sorts of different areas. Or is it sort of more similar to, AJ, what I think you're suggesting, which is that Trump in his own policy positions is going to pivot more away from strict isolationism rather than seeking to kind of glue himself to a candidate who's been espousing that from the beginning? Because, again, obviously it can't be Christie, it can't be Haley, but there are others who take the more interventionist approach. Do you think that's where his eyes must be going?
So I mean, Dexter, you know from watching President Trump, I think the one thing he values more than anything else in the world is loyalty. Nikki certainly doesn't fit that bill, and there are not a lot of interventionist Republicans that do. And so he's kind of playing the waiting game with this, right? He says he's going to announce his vice presidential pick at the convention. And I think we're probably going to see somebody that's been loyal to Trump for a long time. And more than likely, I don't think they're going to fit the Nikki Haley mold or the Chris Christie mold in terms of foreign policy or policy in general. They're going to be somebody that's loyal to him. And the longer that he waits, the more advantage he has in picking, because the polls, as we know, he likes to watch the polls a lot, but the polls in these swing states, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, are trending, Pennsylvania even. I think he has a couple point advantage in Pennsylvania right now. So the more that the polls in those states are going in his favor, the less he'll feel the need to placate, New Hampshire suburban people, right? And, we've got 4 electoral votes. I value them. I think it would be great if we voted for a Republican for the first time in 24 years. But if you're looking at the electoral math, those states have many more electors. They have much more influence on the general election broadly. And so I think watching him for the last, and now Donald Trump is an unpredictable person. I've never, I don't think anybody can predict what he's going to do accurately. I'll disclaimer that. But I have a feeling that we're probably going to end up with somebody that's been loyal to the president for, probably going back to 2015. So maybe a Ben Carson or even a Matt Gaetz or a Byron Donalds, whatever the case ends up being. Of course, Matt Gaetz and Byron Donalds have the problem of living in Florida. So somebody would have to move in order to get the electoral votes for both the president and the vice president. But that's a story for another day. So I think it'll end up being a Trump loyalist more than likely.
Speed round here before we get back to New Hampshire. So, if you had to pick one person who's in the running for VP who you think it could be and or should be, who would it be? For me, it's Senator Tim Scott. I think he'd get a whole other demographic that he's really been struggling with for the more liberty-focused crew that maybe has been off-put by MAGA. He gets South Carolina, maybe pulls back some of the fight he got from Haley and all that. Dexter, who do you think it could be?
Well, I would like someone like Matt Gaetz or J.D. Vance, but I think your point is well taken. Tim Scott would serve well in that role, electorally and I think in office as well.
Chris?
All right, I think, and this, he doesn't get mentioned a lot, but I think my favorite pick would be Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. For a lot of reasons, Virginia we see is in play in the polls. If you believe polls, Virginia's Republican governor won in 2021. He's a one-term governor by constitution, so he can only serve the one term. He has a lot of money behind him, Bain Capital money, and I think he can appeal to a lot of the same people that Tim Scott can. I campaigned for him in Virginia when he was running for governor. I think he would be a really good pick that puts the state of Virginia in play.
All right, so let's bring it back to New Hampshire like I was saying. So Chris Maidment here, you're running for Register of Probate. What is it, and how did you have to look it up before you put your name and put your hat in this for this?
So I didn't have to look it up because, I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, right? But it is arguably the most important position in New Hampshire politics. That's why it's important. It's on my sign. It is a position that 2 years ago, the voters in New Hampshire got a chance to eliminate. It didn't get 2/3 on the ballot, so it still exists. And the funny part about this is it used to be an important position. Okay, it's not anymore. It used to be. So back, it's in the Constitution. It's a constitutional position. When somebody passes away, obviously a lot of these cases go through what's called probate court. But back then, it used to be a probate office. There was a Register of Probate that would deal with all these probate dockets and everything like that. As the probate court got bigger and bigger and more efficient, the legislature saw fit to say, well, we don't really need a Register of Probate, so we're going to take away all of its authority. We're going to give all the probate authority to the probate courts, arguably where it belongs, because, it's going to go to the court anyway, and a judge and a lawyer and all that stuff is going to have to deal with it. So why do we have this position? Well, the legislature can't just get rid of a constitutional position without input from the voters. So they took away all its authority. They took away almost all the salary. It pays $100 a year for nothing. I don't know why it pays $100 a year. Maybe there's a requirement that an elected position pays something. But so it's existed ever since they took away all the authority. Constitutional amendment 2 years ago failed to get the 2/3, so it still exists to this day. And so I'm running for it, man. I'm running for the most important position in New Hampshire politics, County Register of Probate.
Why is it that you think the voters did save it? Was it just sort of New Hampshire nostalgia, or what was it?
So
I'll tell you, I voted to kept it, and I don't know why I did.
The trick. The wording was kind of tricky. So if you look at the ballot and you look at the phrasing of the question, it gave you the current language of the Constitution, which lists all of these constitutional offices for each county: Register, County Attorney, County Treasurer, Register of Deeds, Register of Probate, and then there's one more, Sheriff, County Sheriff, and then the County Commissioners. So it listed, the Constitution lists all these offices in order. And then the question was, shall we change the wording of this section from this to this? And all they did was remove Register of Probate. So if you were, not as up to date on the New Hampshire Constitution or these positions, and you looked at the wording, you'd go, I have no idea what this is asking me. And I think largely that played a part, because if you're just an average voter and you read this and you go, well, they take this Register of Probate out, and what if you don't know what that does? Or what if you had to deal with the actual Register of Probate before the authority got eliminated? And they go, oh no, that's an important position, we got to keep that. So it came close. It was, I think, it was either 58 or 64%. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was one of those two. So it came close, but I just think nobody was advertising on this. Nobody was advocating to pass it, right? It just kind of was there, and the wording was a little wonky, and now it still exists.
And the reporters were like, I got to Google what the hell this is. How am I going to explain it in a headline that people are going to pay attention to get anyone to really care about this allegedly important change that they're going to make? It'll be interesting. So definitely look up who's running for Register of Probate in your county, because it could be entertaining at the very least.
I ran a very unserious write-in campaign for it in Stratford County several years ago, and my theme at the time was where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm really happy to see the kind of transition of like puns and jokes has continued to grow well in that particular office.
I should have talked to you before I printed all these signs. I have 10,000 signs for around the county.
I would have given it to you, yeah.
Ah, man.
All right, but what's really interesting, especially about your move to do this, is you have other motivations, it seems like, for at least part of why you're running for office. No hidden agenda here. No hidden agenda? No fundraising mechanisms for other Republicans?
Well, I forget who it was. Eric Holder maybe said, never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm just kind of turning that around. And I'm like, well, if I'm on the ballot, I might as well use it to fundraise and help other candidates get elected. So that was a secondary thought, not an ulterior motive.
Oh, okay.
I'm very transparent about this.
Yeah, and that money is going to. I haven't had you on since you started doing this. You started 1772action.com, a PAC. What's the motivation behind it, and what makes this fundraising effort different from others that are here in the state?
Well, I mean, we've got 400 state reps around the state, right? We've got 24 senators. If you asked your average Granite Stater who their state rep was, most people just don't know, right? And so we get a lot of good candidates every 2 years that are really, liberty oriented. They're in support of education freedom. They're in support of a lot of the things that most Granite Staters support. And it ultimately ends up being a popularity contest, and somebody that doesn't support those things in certain places will end up getting elected. And I think, Granite Staters broadly support a lot of these policies that these legislators want to bring forward. And so they have a little trouble breaking through. They have a little trouble, getting some name recognition, getting some name ID so that they can win in a primary or a general. And so really it's to help those candidates that hold those beliefs. The policies and the ideas that I've been pushing since I got involved in politics in 2018, universal or education freedom accounts is one of the first issues that I got involved in. And it took us 3 years and we got it passed, and it took us another year and we got it grown a little bit. And, ultimately I want to see that be universal. I think every kid should have access to other schooling models. The Constitution says that we cherish education. The courts have interpreted that to mean that we fund education. And so my view is that if the courts have determined that the state must fund education, then it should fund all forms of education. It should fund every child. It shouldn't just fund the brick and mortar government schools that that most of us know, and a lot of us went to. I went to public school. If a kid is going to do better at homeschool, then they should get the same government funding that a public student gets, because that's just broad-based equality, right? And that's what the court said. Cherished education means we're going to pay for it. And so we shouldn't just pay for one form of education. Imagine if, food stamp recipients could only use one grocery store and it was owned by the government. Imagine if, home heating assistance people could only pick one oil company and it was the most expensive and it was crap oil. Or, there's all these different metaphors you could use, but, if the government is going to be funding it, it should be funding it equally across the board for everybody.
Now, do you think the younger generation is coming into the statewide offices, county offices and such, because of the nature that, like, I'm at the borderline, 37, and the internet appeared when I went off to college, basically, for the most part, with how we currently have it, with Facebook and everything like that. Do you feel like we're in a better spot where it's going to be easier to kind of motivate these younger activists or people that want to go for office to be ready to go and run an effective campaign online?
Yes and no. And I think by and large, a lot of campaigns still operate in the 1999 campaign model. Because a lot of our candidates are still of that generation. But the younger the candidates are, the more they're going to be engaging through digital audiences and on these social platforms like TikTok, and I don't know how to use TikTok. I tried, it failed. Instagram, I don't know how to use that. I'm like, whatever. I gave up. I still use Facebook, and I tell everybody, I'm like, Facebook is for boomers, and here I am, using Facebook. So I think it's interesting. We'll watch the transition. I think it's going to take time. Because when you start running for office and you call somebody that has run for office or consults for these people that run for office, they kind of give you the 1999 playbook by default. And so the younger generation, the more they get experience, the more they get into helping other people run, they'll be giving out the 2024 playbook and then the 2028 playbook and the 2032 playbook, and things will change kind of slowly over time. And I think we'll see that transition. But on that same token, with AI and all this stuff, I'm 36, AJ, so I was right behind you. The internet appeared when I was in high school or middle school or whatever it was. I was playing, AOL chat rooms at, 13 or 14 or whatever. But now we have AI, right? And I think, within 10, 15 years, you can almost entirely replace a classroom environment with artificial intelligence. These virtual reality glasses, you can actually tour Chernobyl with virtual reality glasses and learn about the whole nuclear process and what happened. In the comfort of your own home, right? And so I think it really will empower these curious children that are eager to learn. And as long as we empower the children that want to learn with the information that they're seeking, and we can provide it in new and different visual ways now, I think over time it's going to completely change the education model everywhere.
And so just thinking about what you were discussing with the concept of the PAC. So I'm doing a series right now with Granite Grok where we're looking at how dark money is getting involved local elections, local government. And the first piece that we did highlighted a group I'm sure you've heard of called 603 Forward. They've been very, very successful at recruiting young candidates and fielding them in every level of local election, from dog catcher all the way up. I think they've had several hundred successful elections now under their belt. When you look at the way that they're organized and the way that they've been so successful, they're set up as a nonprofit. And a lot of ways they're funded then are through large national grant dollars that are really are empowering them to do the work that they do. And so I'm just wondering, as a PAC, why you chose sort of that organizational model, because doesn't that deprive you of the ability to go after some of those larger national level grants that could really help put you on par with them in terms of your efforts to recruit candidates?
Yeah, I mean, sure. PAC is the easiest to set up in New Hampshire. It's a $50 filing fee, and you can do it like one person, right?
Okay, yeah.
and to be in terms of becoming a 501c4, which is what I imagine 603 forward is, which is
I believe so.
The IRS qualifies it as a social welfare organization, but those are allowed to do political advocacy. They're allowed to do express advocacy in the state of New Hampshire under our laws. They're allowed to do. There's a lot of latitude there, so long as more than 50% is not electoral. And so AFP, Americans for Prosperity, is classified the same way. They're a 501c4. They're able to take, they have a large network of large donors from around the country that believe in the values that AFP espouses, that fund these various state chapters to work on policy and recruit candidates. And so, I mean, really, it was just like the lowest barrier to entry to get something going. Moving forward, I think there is a need for other right-wing organizations that are modeled in the same way as you just mentioned, so that we can, compete with them on the same field, because, they outraise us, they outspend us. They've got a lot more staff than us. And I think by and large, that's just a product of the values, is that Democrats and progressives generally want to see more government. And so they get invested in the government. And the best way to get invested in government is to get invested in politics and help grow the government. And I think it's like on their side, they would say it's a virtuous circle, right? Because everything feeds itself. On the Republican side, by and large, we just want to be left alone. We want to go to work. We want to bring home dinner. We want to have dinner with our families, go to soccer practice, read a book, and go to bed. And rinse and repeat, right? Like, we don't want to be involved in the government because we want the government to leave us alone. Why would we go get involved with something that we don't like, generally speaking, right? And so I think to really gin up the level of excitement on our side is a lot harder. President Trump did a magnificent job of it in 2015 and 16. He was talking to your average blue collar worker that had been disaffected by the government for so long. And he was saying a message they were receptive to, right? And that sort of, the suburban people that were kind of in the middle got lost in 2020, and he lost by a lot of votes. And now going forward, like, I think it's a struggle to keep people on the right engaged in the process, because just genetically they don't like it. Even when they get involved, there's a lot of stuff like in DC, sometimes here in New Hampshire, these backroom deals and these swampy things that happen. And they're like, well, that was good common sense policy and my party killed it. Why would I be involved in this? And so I think it's like a death spiral on our side, because people get involved, they're passionate, it fails, and then they're like, why am I doing this? This is silly. This is a waste of my time. All this aggravation and stress isn't worth it. I'm out.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah,
it's I just want to grill, or all the activists that came out of the Gamergate movement with, I just wanted to play video games. That's what Trump was like. The meme basically is Trump is a mirror at our culture and society right now, and the mess that it is. Like, I've got an op-ed that's on the site at newenglandtake.com, and it was in the Concord Monitor this week, and he didn't come out of nowhere, but people have had enough red flags go off where they feel like they need to step up, and that's where Trump came in. Unfortunately, in my opinion, he didn't do a great job with sustaining that momentum necessarily with some of his opinions and running his mouth. But I mean, ultimately right now, especially, I mean, versus Biden, I mean, were we going to vote for the continuation of what we've seen in the last 4 years? I mean, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for him in the last run. I spoke against him for 3 years after that election. And the last year, I'm like, all right, I guess we got to do this. Here we go. Buckle up, kiddos, because we got to do this. And it's the nature of our political climate right now. All right, so been good talking for about a half an hour right now. I want to start wrapping it up. I mean, Chris, running for Register of Probate in Cheshire County. Please look into
Hillsborough County.
Hillsborough County. Oh, Hillsborough. Sorry, yeah. And so Hillsborough County Register of Probate. Definitely check out his PAC. You can learn about it at 1772action.com. Anything you want to close out on, Chris?
No, thanks for having me on again. It's good to be back.
Yeah, we'll have you back on for sure, especially when we get closer to Election Day. And
yeah, well, I've got plenty of opinions and a lot of people that don't like them. So
yeah, that's what we like here on the New England Take. All right, Dexter, anything in closing?
No, it was great talking to you guys.
All right, NewEnglandTake.com to get more from the show. Like and subscribe on YouTube. We're posting shorts, posting articles, full-length interviews, and all sorts of other nonsense, especially on the Twitters or the X's or whatever silly name we want to call that now. And we'll talk to you soon.